Hey guys, this is Anthony Morganti. I am MrPhotographer.com. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how you could use any version of Luminar to process a wildlife photo. You could have a photo that looks like this and turn it into something that looks like this. We're going to be working on this image of the eagle. It is a raw file. It has not been processed at all. It is my opinion, at least for my wildlife shots, that I want them to look and represent what that animal looked like when I took the photo. So you're going to see that I don't do a lot of post-processing to my wildlife images. I try to capture it as faithfully as possible in camera and do a minimal amount of post-processing. So I'm not going to do a lot of processing here. If you are interested in me doing more processing, or at least doing more videos where I process wildlife images, in the comments below let me know, and I'll do some more videos in the future. Now, as I mentioned, this is a raw file. I'm just going to start right off by go to Add Filter, and I'm going to go to the Raw Develop filter. Again, if you're not working on a raw file, this will just say Develop. And what I tend to do is start at the top and choose my profile right away. And I'm going to stay with the Luminar default profile. That's fine. Next, I'll go to white balance, and I think I nailed white balance in camera, so I don't really need to do anything there. Now I look at the image and see what stands out. Well, there's a little bit of highlight blown out in here, just a tiny bit. So I'm going to go right to highlights, and I'm going to just pull those down to bring out that little detail that might be there. Next, with shadows. Shadows look pretty good to me. Let's see, I might bring those down just a little bit. Kind of brings the background down a little more so than it does the eagle. So I want the background to be as unobtrusive as possible. So I think that's good. Next, I'm going to get a white point. I'm going to hold the Alt or Option key. It's Alt if you have a PC, Option if you have a Mac. Click on whites. And I'm going to move that to the right until I see some colors coming through. You'll see some blue coming through, a little red. Eventually, you'll probably see a little green, and you see a lot of white. That means I'm starting to clip those color channels, red, green, and blue. When you clip a channel, that means you're removing all detail. It's just totally washed out. And where white is, you're clipping all three channels, so you just have absolute white there. In my wildlife images, I want detail usually throughout everywhere. So I'm going to bring the white slider down till all that color just disappears. So now I have detail everywhere. Similarly for blacks, I'll hold the Alt or Option key and click down. And you can see that I got a tiny, tiny bit of clipping in the black eye, black part of the eye, which is fine. And it looks like I'm clipping a little bit of green over here. Just a tiny bit, but I think that's good. Now, those of you that see me process like a landscape know that I clip blacks quite a bit, or a little bit more at least than my wildlife photos. Again, in wildlife, I usually don't like to clip anywhere. So I'm going to leave the blacks right where it is. Clipping this part of the eye is okay. And clipping a little bit of green here I don't think is a big deal. Now, again, I don't, as many of you know, I don't do any clarity here. And I often won't do contrast either. And I'm not going for this image either. So kind of like it the way it is. So I'm going to go to Lens. And I'm going to click Lens Distortion, Chromatic Aberration, and Defringe. And by the way, if you're interested in the camera and lens I used, the settings, and all the exposure info, all that will be listed in the description below that video, and you could check it out. So I'm fine there. I don't have to do anything with transform. Now, next, I would remove noise. I shot this at ISO 800, but actually the camera I used has pretty decent higher ISO performance. Even though by today's standard 800 isn't super high, I don't have a lot of noise though, so I'm not really going to do any noise reduction at all. Again, you can check all that camera info and stuff in the description below the video. So I'm going to go to Add Filter, and I think I want to add Detail next. Now, you like to use Detail Enhancer in lieu of any other type of sharpener that might be available. So I'm going to go to this, and I like using this because I have more control. I could set the detail for the larger detail in the image, the medium detail, and the smaller. This bird has a lot of fine feather detail, so I'm going to go right to small, And I'm just going to move that to the right. And in my opinion, less is better. I don't want to go too far. It starts looking like pseudo HDR. So I just want to go a little bit, like not a lot. Again, I don't want to misrepresent what the bird looked like. That's just my philosophy. You may think differently. That's fine. There's no right or wrong way. I'm just going to go at 12. I think that's really good enough for details enhancer. Now, I may come back and readjust things, but I do want to adjust the bird's eye. Well, those of you that are familiar with American bald eagles, usually their eyes are very piercing. And although the eye looks fierce, the color is kind of drab looking. And that's because the light that I shot this eagle in was drab. It wasn't very bright. So I could simulate the more direct sunlight hitting the bird's eye. But I want to do that on its own layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to layers and I'm going to click plus. I'm going to add a new adjustment layer. And you'll see it cleared our workspace. I'm going to go to add filter. Now I could do this a lot of ways. I could do saturation vibrance. But I like golden hour. I think that looks more natural quite often. And I'm going to go there. So I'm going to go to golden hour. And I'll close down the filters catalog. And I'm just going to turn the amount up. And you'll see it's going to affect the entire image. But I really am just looking at Mr. Bald Eagle's eye right now. So I'm going to turn that up a little bit. And I think that looks pretty good right there. And I also want to brighten it a little bit. So I'm going to add another filter. And I'm going to add a tone filter for this. And I'm just going to go to exposure and turn exposure up. Now it's going to turn exposure up everywhere. That's fine. I'm just looking at Mr. Bald Eagle's eye. Because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use a layer mask to mask this so it only affects the eye. And I'm going to go up here where it says adjustment layer and click on this little brush. When I do, I'll click on brush. Now I have a brush. I'm going to be in paint in mode, so have it on plus. And I'm going to get a brush that's heavily feathered, softness at 100. I'm going to use the left bracket key to make it a little smaller so it kind of just fits in that iris area. The right bracket key makes it larger. And you can see as soon as I click down, it removed those two filters from everywhere but the eagle's eye. So if I come to exposure now, I could turn it up, down. You can see how it's only affecting the eye. Similarly, the golden hour is the same thing. It's only affecting the eagle's eye. So I'm going to turn this up. Now I don't want to again misrepresent what this bird actually looks like. So I'm not going to go too crazy with the mount. Bring it down. But in direct sunlight, the eagle's eye would look a lot brighter than what it is. So I kind of like that. So now I have these two layers. I have the adjustment layer 1, which is just the adjustments on the eye. And the one below that is the actual raw file itself. And that is our regular adjustments. Now looking at it, it's a little dark. So I am going to bring, now you can see the eye adjustments. When I clicked on it, went away. All right. I have to go back up to the adjustment layer to have that come in. That's fine. We'll come back down here. And what I'm going to do is I think I'll bring all overall exposure up a little bit. Now this of course is going to screw up my white and black point a little bit. But I just want to bring it up just a little bit. It just was looking a little drab. And I'm going to go to the white slider and I'm going to just readjust whites by holding the Alt or Option key in and bring that back down. And similarly for blacks, I don't think I need to do anything there. That's good. So I readjusted those so we made that brighter. So we'll go back to our adjustment layer 1. We'll get that eye adjustment in there. And you can see there's our eye. I think that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to go back to the bottom layer and I want to add a vignette. Now I have to do it on the bottom layer because there's no mask here. If I try to add the vignette to the adjustment layer, remember we have a mask on that layer. It's only affecting the eye. It won't affect anywhere else. I need my vignette on the entire image. So I need to go to that lower layer. So I'll go to the vignette. I'm just going to darken the edges just a touch. Just like that. And see what inner light. Just a tiny bit on inner light. Then I'll click back up on my top adjustment layer. Get that eye adjustment in there. And that's it. I'm done. Now, you might have said, boy, you didn't even add any saturation. Well, I really didn't need to. The bird wasn't super colorful. I don't want to misrepresent what the bird looked like. Now again, you could, under different lighting conditions, maybe the bird would be more colorful, and if you want to try to simulate that, you would go on this lower layer, go to add filter, and you would want to add a saturation vibrance filter to this layer. And usually for animals, you can bring saturation up like that. Then click back on the top adjustment layer to have all the adjustments together, and you could go like that. And many would argue that that looks much better, but that's fine. To me, that's good. And that's the way I go about adjusting wildlife. Now again, if you'd like to see me do more, maybe something a little more difficult, this was relatively easy. But if you'd like to see me do something a little more difficult, mention it in the comments below and I'll do a future video on it. Also, I'll look in the description below the video to get all that camera info that I mentioned, and you could see the settings I used and how I took this shot.